there are some employees and listener questions, and they are going to bring them in. And
Okay, I'm excited. Thank you. Okay, it's about BCI.
okay.
BCI, there's the ideal BCI, right? The ideal that we've been discussing. So can you tell us a little bit about what does this ideal BCI promise us as users?
Okay. First of all, I'm not sure that everyone knows what's a BCI. So BCI is a brain-computer interface. Maybe we'll start like from the imagination or from, science fiction. So what comes to mind, to me at least, is this, spaceship connected to this person's brain, and he flies the spaceship by his thoughts. So that's like the very, very futuristic BCI that people imagine.
Yeah.
And I think that like
Implants. You're talking about like implants where you can have all kinds of superpowers.
it's a kind of this is a totally futuristic BCI. I don't know how it will work. And like every other technology, what leads technology is science fiction. First of all, you have someone imagining something that is currently totally impossible. So first of all, you have like futuristic impossible idea, and then people are getting excited about it like us, and then they start trying to build that. The thing is that the world that we live in is physical, and if I want to grab this bottle, I need to use my hand and to use like the coordination of many muscles. So there's a lot of data manipulation going on in terms like you need this muscle to work at exactly this pressure and this muscle to start working at the exact time. But in our brain, it's not that complicated. It's complicated, but the data flows. And it's the same thing in the computer. So if I want to move a mouse from left to right, or I want to type a sentence, it's not a very complicated thing to do. You don't need to move all these muscles in order to do that. If we could, in a way, connect our brain directly to a computer or directly to the web in some magical way, some futuristic magical way, we could, for example, direct our thoughts to be written or imagine something and it will appear. So that's like the imaginary BCI. That's the superpowers that you could have if you had a BCI in the world.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary though, because if you had this BCI, right, and your thoughts are are digital now, you can upload them and download them and connect them. You're going to be, you could at some point be also afraid of those thoughts. People can access, privacy becomes so much. If today it's like something that's borderline, I think it could be horrible.
So of course there are ethical questions here. Like when is it under as a user, your control, or is it under some big brother's control? Or like, again, back to this ship that controlled by a human mind. So in many dark, futuristic science fiction, the person itself is not aware of himself anymore. It's just a brain without the body. So that's of course a very dark future that BCI could have. But currently we are very far from any of that. But what's nice about your question, and it goes to later on to why the hand. When you listen to the brain, directly to the brain, you can use MRI, which is a huge machine to do that, or you can use implanted electrodes inside your brain. You as a user don't have any way of controlling that. But your muscles, your body muscles are something that you control voluntarily. There's no way to make you move them. There is a way. You can inject signals to your brain or inject signals to your muscle that
but
will.
This is a good.
But you decide to move your fingers. You decide to move your hand.
Yeah. So only I can really force my muscles. That's what you're saying. Right? So I cannot have someone lift my own weight, right? I won't be feeling any I won't be taking any action. I'll be passive, not active.
What's important about it is well, I had a friend who was working on her doctorate, on her PhD. She was working on this truth machine,
Yeah.
lie detector
Yeah.
that is based on EEG. And what's scary about it, if you use this device, you have no way of selecting not to answer or no. It's like if you are being asked a question, about 300 milliseconds after you heard the question, your brain says the answer, whether you want it or not. So if you listen to that, it's hard. It's not something that we can, like, it's not, you won't have it after 300 milliseconds. It requires a lot of data science and data manipulations to get that. But then you have no way of saying, I don't want to participate. But when it's your muscles, you do have. It's totally voluntarily. Only you can select if to give the answer or not.
So I guess this brings me to the second part of this question, because that was only the A. And so, but you're already answering it, I guess, is the more, I guess, practical side of BCI. So what I would say, if you're continuing this conversation with the hand, what would be the more practical aspect now of using sort of this sampling from muscles, this voluntary action, versus what you talked about, the lie detector? So how do these things work out differently?
I think what's important first to understand here is that when you, it's like it sounds more intuitive that if you want to connect to the brain, so connect to the brain, put electrodes on the scalp. Okay, it's the more the more direct approach. But this approach has a lot of drawbacks because the brain has a lot of activity. You have like a billion of neurons, and they are all doing their work and creates signals. Now, if you are implanting a chip into specific neurons on the brain, so you have specificity. It means it listens to a specific neuron doing its work. Of course, you have to do a surgery and it's very dangerous, but you get the best possible signal. And when you work with electrodes on your scalp, you don't have this specificity because everything is working together and you cannot select exactly what to listen to. Now, on the hand, you are in the middle. Because you have much less signals, you have a lot of muscles that you can listen to, but it's more specific. So you have this benefit of selecting what to listen to. That's one reason to work with muscles. The other one is that it doesn't matter which BCI approach you will take, you need to, as a user, to learn how to use it. So if, let's say, we are using an electrode inside the brain, it's connected to a specific place, but you don't know how to operate it. It's like when we were kids, I was trying to learn to move the fingers in the leg, but you don't know how to do it. So you look at it and you try and you try again and it doesn't work. And then you are capable of doing a slight movement. It requires learning. It's the same thing. Now you try to operate a new neuron that you didn't operate this way before, and it takes you a lot of practice. But muscles are something, the muscles of the hand are something that we know how to operate because we use them daily. Actually, the hand takes about 40% of the brain's computing power in order to detect incoming data and control all its possibilities, all of the degrees of freedom of the hand. So you know how to use it. You don't have to learn how to use your hand. It is directly connected to brain functions that you want to listen to.
So I guess so. This is the breakdown of the ideal BCI versus what is practical and what we want. In our hand, we have most of the information you're saying about control. A lot of the things that are relevant, the things that are voluntary, the things that we want to measure. So, that makes it much more practical for a product.
It's more practical and it's more ethical.
Yeah.
Both of them. Yeah.
So we can go to
so
the next
next
question.
question.
You wanna try this?
Okay,
You're
I'll
doing
pick
this?
one. Actually, this is. I'll be
Specialized,
selecting. Okay, so this one. Why a wristband? Why not another device or form factor?
I think this is what we just sort of answered now from the technology point of view. But I think, again, maybe we'll say a few more words. I'll say a few more words about the, how we behave in general, how we as consumers. So we didn't want and we don't want to educate people. We don't want people to do something they're not accustomed to. We don't have that possibility here. We're not going to change the way people are going to act. And so the ideal or the only place that I believe in that could be a BCI, really a practical sort of product around BCI is the wrist. You're not going to wear something around your head, really. Even if you love technology, you're not going to do this. Almost never, right? You could put something on your body, I guess, or some stuff, but that's only if it weighs a little bit, and our clothes are still the fabrics that we have, they're not electronic really. And so that leaves mostly the wristband. There's some rings, some earrings, some small things really, but the wrist is where there's a lot of interesting control things that are going on, a lot of action. And also there's an opportunity to wear things without it being seemingly technological. When I walk in the street and I wear mudra, no one really asks at this point, because we didn't make it, loud. We made it black and, sort of subtle like this. No one asks me anything. I'm just, a regular person. And that's amazing in my point of view. If you remember our talks 10 years ago about XR glasses, if you remember, we talked about
exactly what I wanted to.
some ideas about some, people wearing XR, and it turns out that some of those people were physically hurt. There was a lot of pushback against having anything that invades privacy in the public space, and
I think
this
it goes
doesn't
back.
invade any privacy really.
It goes back to the original questions we had when we started the company, because BCI is amazing, BCI is superpowers, but it's totally not social acceptable. Headbands and all kinds of electrodes on your head are not socially acceptable, and that's exactly why wearables close the gap. This I think it's around a 20 years gap between having a technology that is ready as a technology in the like science from science point of view and technical point of view, till it's becoming something that everyone can use. Not because of how it looks, because of how you see yourself in society. By the way, when I was a student, I was volunteering to EEG tests. It was a lot of work putting the electrodes, and they entangle in the hair, and they put these gels and everything. And then every movement of this electrode is ruining the signal and the data. And then after 3 hours of work, everyone wants to go to eat. And then you go with this bundle of electrodes and wires to the cafeteria, and it's a problem because everyone looks at you
very unsocially acceptable. I don't know, It's not something you want really, and it's uncomfortable.
Okay. So you want to take the next question?
So next question. I think it's a continuation question of some of the things we've been speaking about, but let's maybe try to drill it down a little bit more. So there's companies today like Muse, the EEG wristband, and BCI in general. And so the BCI on the wrist, right? We're talking about the BCI on the wrist. Is there a few more interesting things we could say about this? For example, we spoke about, you said 20 years ago, it takes some time for things to mature. And you mentioned flexible PCB. We mentioned flexible PCB, but you also mentioned dry electrodes. So dry electrodes and such technologies, how long have they been out approximately? Do you remember?
Well, I think dry electrodes have been used for the last 10, 15 years, maybe even more. But the issue is not only the electrode, because you need to also update all the amplifiers around it and the electronics around it. So you remember in the beginning that when we just started the company, we always used these gels. You put
Yeah.
them on the skin in order to get connectivity, and then it goes to how the body actually transfer.
So maybe you can say, because the question we sort of answered it previously, this connectivity with the skin, this ionic exchange. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this magic. Okay.
Okay, so here the thing is that the body is not like a PCB, a printed circuit board. In a printed circuit board, you have you have like the wires, and let's say a very simple one, you have wires and a little LED and the battery. So, and the battery pushes electrons inside the wires, and then they turn on the LED. But in the body is more like it's based on moisture, on liquids in a way. So the body is using not electrons but ions to transfer signals. All our nervous system is based on calcium and sodium and other. And when we want to pick up signals from the body, we need to pick up this signal that is based on ions. In electrodes that are not dry electrodes, the wet electrodes are based on a material called AgCl, which is a silver chloride, because the body has chlor ions, and when you have some kind of activity, chlor ions can leave the electrode and go into the body. And when you have the negative activity, the ions go back to the electrode. So you have like a real current going between your electronics and your body.
So these ions flow through the body. There's some channels they go through, right? They go through some channels. They are monitored, but they're not like they don't have like an exact sort of pace like the electrons, right? So they're more free flowing in the solution, in the liquid of our body.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But then you need to have a good transfer, because you have one type of electricity, electrons based, and another type of electricity which is ion based, and you need to let them speak with each other, which is not that simple. So the original way to do that was specific electrodes, but then you needed a gel that helps this connectivity.
Yeah, it helps them influence one another, influence the charge carriers,
Exactly. And now, when you want to use dry electrodes, it's a totally different approach. You are not trying to have a direct current of the charge carriers. It works more like a capacitor. So there's a change of voltage next to the electrode, and then inside the electrons getting closer to, like, if the charge is positive, then you will have electrodes going near the skin, and if it's negative, they will go far away from the skin, and then you will have like a change of a charge inside the electrode. But the problem is that this exchange is slower, and it's slower, and then it tends to have additive noise, and if the electrode moves, it creates a lot of movement noises, what we call disconnections. So you need to overcome these issues both with the electronics and with the algorithms, and these issues are not issues of wet electrodes, but no one wants to use wet electrodes in a real product.
So just to sort of help people understand what we're saying here, so we're moving our fingers, right? Innervating our muscles here. Ions flow, right? Move forward, and then the muscle fibers contract. They push on the tendons, and then my hand sort of does
like in a bicycle when you move the.
And this is sort of the one of the capabilities of the sensor to sense this innervation, right? So this is sort of the magic, this ionic exchange. So that's it about innervation ionic exchange, like anything else we wanted to sort of say? It's a big subject, I know.
It's a huge subject.
But
It's
anything else that's
amazing.
maybe important for you to mention regarding Mudra or something maybe
I
else?
think that it's very important to understand that the brain and the neurology is the next frontier. It's the next frontier. Everyone wants to be there. And because the capabilities, the abilities that it can give to the everyday person is huge. It will take some time, but everyone will be there.
Okay, thank you. So great. So this is it about BCI, about
So to the next question. A question for Leeor. What was our first funding?
that. Okay. So we went to the chief scientist. There is
The Innovation
chief
Authority.
scientist of the Innovation Authority of Israel. And this, you can get funding for doing new things, for doing something new, nothing else. It's for, especially for novelty-based projects. So this was a classic sort of setup for this sort of funding, and we went for it. We built we made a nice presentation. We explained everything that we talked about here in BCI to the chief scientist, and also we met with the representative. So that was really exciting. We met with the representative of the chief scientist of the Innovation Authority, and this gave us a lot of a lot of confidence to ourselves and a lot of confidence to investors that this is real technology. So it was under review, under peer review in a sense, peer review in the technology sector. So there's more people looking at these ideas, at the sort of structure of what we're going to do with them, and giving everyone more confidence that this is a real sort of technology that you can do. And then we were very excited about this, and we finally got it. And, you know, we used that to build some of the things we spoke of in the previous
session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
You want to pick up a question, or I will pick another one?
Next one.
Yeah. Wow, this is a heavy one. Let's start with another one. Okay. So, what is the role of AI in the development of the Mudra Band?
When we're looking at developing a Mudra Band, everything that we did, or ideally everything that we do, is try to make it data-driven. We try to implement a database, some metrics, the ability to measure. So really, I'll say it in another way. The role of AI, or the role of good experiment, which we set up, is really you could with a good experiment really nail it with this technology. Because then, okay, one way you could have is not to do AI. Okay, you don't do any data-driven based development, and then you're locked into one family of things, and you cannot have that extra ability to really fine-tune yourself to a person. You don't have that extra ability to reach high accuracy. But on the other hand, we have problems. So if you want to put a huge neural network on a small like sort of device, it's going to drain the battery, and it's not even an option on most devices. So I don't know how much of our audience knows a little bit about embedded development and about which algorithms can run on such devices, on Apple Watch devices. But we've done all this, you know, throughout the years. But to really sort of nail it, the only way that I believe, that we believe that could do, is we could build a truly accurate, tunable interface, is with all this AI that's been, that talk about AI out there. And when we look at this talk of AI, it's really confusing, because you're seeing a lot of neural nets, you're seeing a lot of text, a lot of large language models, a lot of confusing things. Terminology is confusing, but at its core, the technology, the data-driven, a good labeled experiment and supervised learning is, I think, in my opinion, something we're going to see a lot in Mudra. Okay, we see it already, but we're seeing it, and we saw it in the Vision Pro, where we gave data and tuned our hands in XR and the Vision Pro glasses. But this, I think, the supervised learning is the key sort of technology that's going to change products such as this.
You know, the thing is, AI is, like you said, it's data-driven, and it requires like huge models and a lot of data. Why should I do that? You know, why shouldn't I just take my own data and I will see that if I move this or that, it will be different.
It's a good point. There's a lot of, I think, misconceptions around this point. Why use data? You're right, right? So, or why use neural nets in general? You really want to, when you're doing something, you want to be able to make it as repetitive as possible. And in order to build really, so you tend to sort of, when you build a very simple formula, you tend to build it for yourself. Things work on yourself, and then you can sort of cannot scale the algorithm. So you could develop some idea. It's sort of okay, but it has some instances, some edge cases, some problems where it doesn't exactly work. And that, when you have a lot of people doing these different things, then you have a lot more and more different, a little bit, the signals look a little bit different. The gesture itself, or the way that we control, is different. And so it's actually a different action. And so what you call one thing, another person can call another. So it really goes back to the experiment. When you have a good experiment with multiple people being asked to do the same thing in the same manner, but you give them the freedom to do it their way, right? So you get all this cross-user variability, all these differences between what you call control and what I call control. And you get all the different kinks and different sort of small things that could move, tiny, minute movements that could have influenced that action. And then you're able to generalize. You don't always have to go back and question your main sort of assumptions and go back and forth. And that's, I think, sort of the differences, the two main differences in algorithm approach, where you guide the algorithm. There's always a mixture between the two, a good mixture, but you guide the algorithm, or the data guides the algorithm. And we try here to find the sweet spot, because you're not going to have the infinite data sets. We're not going to be able to collect to the scale that we need, that is ideal. So we need to, but, and I think this is a point regarding data and collection and so forth. There's sort of a balance between the amount of data you need and the amount of things you want to recognize. So if you're looking at languages, you're going to recognize many, many different things. But if you're looking at Mudra and control, you want it to be concise and specific. You want to do specific actions. So relative to what you want to do, you're right, your data may be enough. So you're not going to need to, go and get web scale data to work on your day-to-day. So for your question, you could collect in a sane manner. We want to collect sane experiments, not overdo it. On the other hand, we don't want to, we want to have a repetitive analytical process where we could scale the company. With more data, get better results, more functionality, and so on.
I remember, like, in the first, it wasn't a product, like prototype that was software and hardware. So we had these issues that, I put the band on my hand, I'm doing a calibration, and then it recognizes some gestures. And then then you put it on yourself, and then it doesn't work. And then I put it on myself the other day, and I have to recalibrate again. One of the challenges that we had in the beginning was the variability between people is so big. Sometimes when I move my thumb, I get a signal that looks exactly like what you would get if you move your index finger. And the same algorithm will confuse. And I remember how much time you spent.
So, this contradicting reactions phenomenon is something that there is, I would say, almost no literature around this. Because look at our day-to-day life. You could see there's no different, you could distinguish between a cat and a dog. There's different kinds of dogs, and there's edge cases and all kinds of breeds of dogs and so on. But in general, there's no contradicting reaction. A dog doesn't look like a cat, and almost, and a cat doesn't look really like a dog. And so, but it could look like that what you described right now, the thumb and the index, could happen. And this brings us to to what it means to calibrate, what it means to have personalization. I think there's two aspects of personalization. One, which you actively seek to give data to teach the model, to teach the computer, and one that the computer learns you, right? It gets a little bit of data from you, and it tunes itself. I know a lot of people maybe that are listening or know a little bit about deep learning, about fine tuning. There's a few approaches to do this, but most of them are nuanced. You need to really nail these calibration procedures in order to do them well. And that brings me again to the original sort of things we've been doing in the company. So in our first, it reminds me of our first, you talked about the chief scientist. So I remember that we built models for our partner Asher. We just had him sitting here for hours, collecting all kinds of gestures. And the first models that we showed was built exclusively for him. It didn't need anyone else, right? It didn't need data for more people. We didn't try to generalize across more people. And this works quite well. It works surprisingly well without, but you're going to need to take a lot of time, a lot of patience, and no one is going to, do that really in a product. So we stopped doing that. But it is so sort of these deep learning technologies, neural nets, these calibration procedures allow you to really tune the model, to tune it really to yourself, even to build it based on yourself only. And that's one really powerful thing, because we're different and we can sort of tune the model to the hardware, to the connectivity, so-called, to the way that we interface. But there's also a different aspect of this, is that people don't have the time and the patience to learn and to teach the computer. So what do? And this goes back to the sweet spot, to these few-shot learning methods. So I don't know how many of us have encountered these things before, but sometimes it happens, even in LLMs, where you talk a lot to the bot, right? And then it asks you, wait a minute, I'll give you two questions. Tell me which is better.
Two answers.
Which is better? And this he actually gives you so this is an example of the bot trying to learn you, or trying to become smarter. So you give it a label, okay? Really, you tell it, this is my preferred reaction, and then it sort of learns that. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. So that's sort of the work that, and the R&D that took.
I think that you bring up here this, this tension between two values that we have in a product. One is the out-of-the-box experience, where you want someone, and this is more for Ohad to talk about that, but that you want a product to work on anyone just when it's outside of the box. And this is very hard when people are so different. And on the other hand, you want to have personalization. I want to use my hand this way, and you want to use it that way. When you have out of the box experience, you will have few options, 1, 2, 3 options that will work on anyone all the time. But when you want to go to personalization, you maybe have 6, 7, maybe 10 options, but they will be tailored to you. And you will not, because now you already know the product, you already played with it, and now you want to get more out of it, and you know what the benefits are going to be, so you are willing to do some calibration or to teach it.
Exactly. This needs to be, there needs to be with the user, you first need to win his trust. So out of the box experience means that you need to win that user's trust. Once you have a trust, even a initial trust, you could ask him to do more. But people today are not willing to sit for hours initially for the promise of a BCI. They want to taste it and then to, take the time and learn furthermore. And it makes sense, from a user perspective. Maybe it doesn't make sense from a data scientist's perspective, but from a user, that's all. It's perfectly understandable.
Okay, so let's see what other questions we have here. Again, for you, Leeor. We have in our hands a new modality. What was the Algo-Plan? How do we build better and better algorithms?
So I think initially when we sort of explored these experiments, these data sets, and the outputs of the sensors, there's a lot you could do, right? You could use it in many, many different ways, this modality. You could use it for control, for monitoring, for different things. And it's not, really clear exactly how to go about collecting it, how to do this and all that. But there's one, and so I went to my research team and we spoke a little bit about what could be done. And we, there were things, this was the time after the ImageNet competition, and it was clear that that software is about to change. So you need to take that into account. You need to think how it's going to pan out in the future. But you also need to take the time and learn what there is, And was, and still is, a lot of good data-driven models, random forests, and other, classic machine learning models, together with specifics for biopotential processing that you could use together to get good, a good or solid performance. It won't be able to do all the things that we spoke about to tune and to do all this, but okay, it still is a milestone on the way, right? And so we spoke of these different methods of how to gradually collect more and the challenges that go about with this. So one of the clear challenges that you need to wait for the right time to do it is manual annotation, right? So you have a new modality, but in order to use supervised learning, you need to do a lot of manual work to just annotate where the gesture happens. Again, I don't know how many people are aware of this, but a lot of the image classifiers and the language models initially being that were built and are being built are built with a lot of help from, if you're aware of Amazon Took, which is a service that Amazon gives to outsource manual annotation.
It reminds me the days that Alex was working on going on the data, and all of us actually, but Alex was mostly doing that, and looking on sample by sample by sample of signals. And at the end of the day, you go out of the room, you go out of work, and the mountains look like signals, the trees look like signals, like your brain is only seeing signals.
Yes, it's challenging because there's so many considerations here. Because so we spoke of just in a tiny way, the segmentation, but there's also a lot of practical things. We spoke about latency, timing issues, and so all these things come out after you look at them, right? If you have like a simultaneous action, but a little bit of a skew in time, some issues, then these things come up, and then you're thinking about the signals, but you're also thinking about how to fix these artificial things that are happening in your database to get, the fidelity you need. And so it's a massive sort of undertaking to do, because there's so many different ways. You have this new modality. You have a new new data. It's really exciting, a new something that you can measure. But in order to use it, you need to do a lot of work. That's not data. It seemingly is not related to data science, but it is the core of what we do here, which is actually to really understand all these issues, eliminate them, and then annotate them. And I think that brings me to one of the innovations that you introduced in the last years is the automatic annotation. Maybe you could, I don't need this is maybe a question for me. Maybe you could say a few words about the automatic annotation methods that we, sort of implemented in the last.
So one of the hardest problems of annotating what we called segmenting the data was that when a person does it, you have a lot of falses, because you have something that looks exactly like in your eye, like an activity that you would like to, that you would have classified it as maybe tapping your fingers. And you want to have a clear ground truth. You want to have something that is always true. We found a way to connect, like it's in a way a hack, because the electronics is already, the product is already built, and we just used like another port to connect an external button that you wear on your hand.
A external conductive fabric button, right?
Yes, it's not a button that you have to press. It's enough to touch your fingers. So when you touch your fingers, you close a circle, and then over the Bluetooth, you don't just transmit the raw signal of the SNC raw signal for the data. You also have when the fingers closed and when they opened. And you could actually one of the hardest problems that also another thing that people are that they are not aware of it is synchronization, because you could, for example, use an external button connected, maybe a keyboard or something like that, and you press the keyboard and you have the timing of the press, but it's not aligned with your signals. So this synchronization is crucial. And also internally, between the sensors that we use, we worked very hard to make sure that they are all aligned on the same time. They all use the same time samples, because otherwise an event happens on one sensor at this point and on another point in another sensor. You cannot teach the algorithm that they are the same event.
Yes, so the conductive fabric really helped us speed up these experiments, because what happened is that, okay, we're doing user experience-based experiments, right? This means tapping our fingers together, different fingers. It means dragging and dropping, all kinds of movements such as these. Annotating them manually saves many hours of manual work that we don't, we do this on our own, right? We don't, outsource these things because of the challenges that you mentioned. We want to go through all the data, right? And so we go through, this saves us a lot of time, because, okay, the button gives us a signal, right? When we close our exact moments where we close our fingers, open them, drag and drop and taps, etc., are very, we can see those gestures very well. And so that really speeds up. So you could get big data in the sense of biopotentials really quickly with such methodology, and that really speeds up, the process.
Actually, I wanted to ask you one last thing in this area, maybe because I'm not a data expert. I need to see in my eyes. So when I'm looking at data, I want to see when I'm doing this is how I have all my I have a threshold, and everything that is above the threshold is gesture A, and everything that is below the threshold is gesture B. And that's how I would love the world to be. And it's not like that. The world is not that simple. Why is it that the world is not that simple?
It's a good question that I don't know the answer to. I've been asking myself lately. I can say regarding neural nets that they are simple, that they do these operations such as sum and threshold and all these things just automatically, and a lot of that, and so they do those things that you mentioned, these feature extraction, just in parallel and many times and in different ways. But I guess that it wouldn't be fun the other way, right? We wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't so complex, I guess. So it's also, part of it.
Okay, yeah, it was great talking again.
Thank you. Well, next time we must do this again.